Greetings. This video is called The Rise of Man. It touches on Genesis 3. In this Bible that I own, it says the fall of man, but I want to show you that it's the rise of man. Um, so I'm not going to go read the whole story. I'm going to paraphrase. You can read it, Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 24. Um, so it starts out by saying that the serpent was more subtle or craftier than any of the beasts of the field that God had made. So the serpent goes to Eve and says, "Did he poses a question? He says, "Did God really say you can't eat of any of the trees in the garden?" And she says that, well, he said we can eat of the trees, but it's just not the one in the middle of the garden. If we eat of it and touch it, we'll surely die. Um, he says that's not true, really. He said you won't surely die. That's what he says. You won't surely die. God knows that if you eat of it, you'll become like Him, to know good and evil. So she basically saw that it was desirable for knowledge and it looked good and tasty and whatnot. She ate it, gave her husband, and immediately their eyes were open and they knew that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and covered themselves. God walking around, they heard God walking around in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid. Adam hid. And God calls out for Adam, and Adam um says, I hid because I was afraid, because I was naked. So God responds in this way. He says, who told you were naked? Did you eat of the tree that I told you not to eat of? And Adam basically goes right to blame shifting and says it was the woman who get you sent for me. He indirectly blamed him, which was facts though. But he said that the woman gave it to him. The woman says the serpent, the God of the Bible, gets pissed or mad or upset and says, hey, I'm dishing out all punishments. And he goes down the line. He starts out with the serpent, then he goes to the woman, and he finally ends off with Adam. And in verse 21, he makes them coats of skin, both Adam and Eve. And then in verse 22 is something really interesting. Verse 22, for me, confirms what the serpent was saying. And it says, and the Lord God said, behold, that man has become like one of us to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence was taken, and placed at the east of the garden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. So when I realized this, because I've read this passage a few hundred times, but it at that particular time when it registered, it really showed the character of the individual or the deity in this Bible. And that particular passage in verse 22 showed me that he had fear or concern that Adam and Eve were going to become like him and no longer need him. They've already obtained the knowledge of good and evil, and he confirms what the serpent said in verse 4 and 5. And he basically says, yes, God, Adam has become like one of us, and he's going to go all the way and live forever. No, we got to stop this, and kicks him out the garden, and then puts guards at the garden to guard the tree of life, to stop him from living forever. A couple things just come out to me in this is that, one, in verse 7, when their eyes were both open and they immediately knew that they were naked. They knew that they were in a shameful state, a deplorable state, and they tried to correct it by showing fig leaves, and then they hid from God, and Adam says why. He tells God why he was hiding. He was like, I was afraid because I was naked. So he understood now that he's gained the knowledge of truth, the truth, because now that I'm gonna explain why that is. Now that he's gained the knowledge of the truth, he knew that he was in a state that was shameful, and he was afraid that God would see him in this state. But to me, it shows the character of this deity or individual is that um, nakedness is not a good thing, because if it wasn't a big deal, in verse 21 he wouldn't have sold them fig leaves, not fig coats of skin, and put them on them. And people can speculate about the mind of God. However, I'm not trying to speculate about what he was thinking. I'm going on what it says. And Adam was afraid because he was naked. That's a shameful state, obviously. And God then later sows him skin, coats of skin. And it kind of reminds me of like when slaves were like outlawed from reading to know the truth, so they wouldn't become knowledgeable and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this is not the type of state where I should accept or be at." Or the movies where the drug dealers got everybody naked chopping up coke, and they just workers. It was kind of like that to me. It was like he was afraid of them knowing what kind of subservient condition they was in. And you know he gets mad, he gets upset, and dishes out all these punishments, and then he confirms that he's afraid that he'll live forever. So to me, this guy doesn't seem like an omniscient, omnipotent, and you know he doesn't seem like this. He seems very human and very self-centered, selfish, and somewhat narcissistic. If you go later on into the Old Testament, this was just one of the scriptures. Even if you go to the next chapter, chapter 4, where it talks about Cain and Abel, and it's my impression that he facilitated the murder of Abel by his actions and his words towards Cain. In Genesis 1:29, it gives you the original diet. It says, "And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be meat." So vegetarian, whatever diet, that's the original diet. Fast forward to chapter 4, in verses 3, it says, "And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offerings. And but unto Cain and his offerings he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? Like you don't know. It's just like having children. If you have children, you would never do this. Or if you do this, you already know why one of them is going to be upset and the other one's not. That's like a rhetorical question. Like, I know why you're mad. Because you're not getting it. You don't feel accepted by me. And I don't understand why he would ask that. It's almost devious, why he would ask, why art thou wroth? And then he said, If thou doest well, shall thou not be accepted, but if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto you these shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So he basically says, do well. Like, I don't see. So he knew, like, if he's an omnipotent and all seeing, all powerful, all his omnis and all that. He would, it wouldn't have went down like that. But you could speculate on why he did what he did. You could speculate on the good in it or whatever, but it still wasn't good, you know. And it's almost like he set it up. And if you gave the original diet, that should have been like, oh yeah, this is great, the ground, but you want the fat of the the first the firstlings, the little younglings, and the fat of the flock. I guess the best of the flock. So I don't know if you love meat or something, or it's savory to you, like it says in what is it, Exodus and Leviticus and all that. But it just showed the character of this individual, and that's all I wanted to say is that um because the Old Testament is a foundation for the three major religions of this realm. So it just really shows the character of this guy, you know. And it opened my eyes. Without free will, oh, free will, that's what I wanted to touch on, is that without the knowledge of good and evil, you wouldn't have free will. You wouldn't have the choice to choose righteousness or wickedness. You wouldn't have that choice because you don't know. And God was blocking them from the truth, because that's truth. You know what I'm saying? The knowledge of good and evil, think about it, it's truth. And you wouldn't have the truth. And he denied you from the truth. So that's all I wanted to say. Peace.